You're tuned in to Horror Slop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is Horror Slop. And now the first descent. One story to open the night. Just enough to crack the door and let something in.
It must have been good timing because work had become unbearable. I needed a break. Needed a change. I wrote out my resignation. I even discussed it with my direct manager. When all my ducks were in a line, I hit send. Took a deep breath and literally took a welcome step back from my laptop. Maybe I'd mail my laptop this time. I was starting to think about celebrating when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but the caller ID showed the name of my, now former, CEO Frank. So it's nearly August now and I still work for the same company. I'm not happy, but I eat. I'm not sane anymore either. But when I keep my head down and work, no one knocks on my door. Strangely, the hardest part was being lied to. One thing keeps nagging at me: who was behind all of this? Capitalism, my boyfriend points out from the other room. Well, if that is true, why couldn't I quit? Why can't I just quit? And then the answer presented itself out of the ether. This could be hell. And you can't quit hell. Could be heaven too, the boyfriend likes to point out. Or kind of a limbo. Or the like.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun, and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
I think something went wrong when I was born. My parents tell me it was fine, other than being so close to Christmas. They didn't want a child born near Christmas because they were afraid it would be overshadowed by the holiday. They let me do whatever I wanted for my birthday, and if that meant that I wanted a slumber party with 20 of my friends, so be it. I learned from an early age that the night before my birthday was special, however. It was a time for me and me alone. I couldn't let anyone else know about the 12 minutes after midnight, those 12 minutes leading up to the moment of my birth. 12 minutes in which I didn't exist, the day of my birth, but not yet the moment, a strange void in which I was and was not. I can't explain where I got that idea. It's something that's always been in my head, from the moment I could form memories. I think I tried talking about it with my classmates once, along with everything else that happens in those 12 minutes, and I quickly learned that I was the strange one and I shouldn't tell this story, because I would be laughed at. It started small, but profoundly terrifying for a small child. My earliest memory is of a dark, claustrophobic space and the weight of the blankets I was hiding under. The heat of my own body and the stale air that I desperately tried to not breathe, too afraid they would hear me, even though I knew it was too late, for I held the edge of the blanket down with both hands even as they gently pried at it, trying to lift it up and reveal me cowering underneath. As I got older, hiding under the blanket was not enough. I was in 3rd grade the first time they pulled me out from under there. They lifted it up just enough to reach a hand through, and even in the darkness I could see that it was human, but too angular. The swell of joints and the curve of skin was entirely absent. It was like a cutout of a hand. There was no color, either, and no depth. It did not reflect the light, scant as it was. I screamed for my parents. Sobbing, I told them what happened, and my father investigated the house and told me all the windows and doors were locked, nothing had gotten in, and it was probably a nightmare. Happy birthday, I whispered to myself as December 20th began and the darkness started to crawl in across the walls, starting at the corner of my vision. The 12 minutes in which I didn't exist and the void came to claim me. They surrounded me and I stood to confront them. I felt cold fingers close on my legs, on my arms, and I braced myself as they began to tug, to drag me towards the void. And my front foot gave a step. Another. I stumbled and panic welled up in my chest. I was losing. They were dragging me forwards, inch by inch, and I wondered what would happen when I reached the edge of the floor. Would I fall? Would I die? Would I cease to exist? My breath felt like fire in my lungs and my chest heaved in tiny, hysterical gasps. And in my panic I slapped one of the hands, then I closed my fingers into a fist and I hit it at the wrist and it shattered. Just like that. Shattered, like glass, and fell into splinters on the floor. In my freshman year of college I bought a baseball bat and smuggled it into my old bedroom. Classes were out and part of me was relieved because my roommate wouldn't be involved, but part of me was also sad because I wanted to know if anyone else could see the darkness too. I still don't know. I've never married and I've never had anyone around at midnight on my birthday. I keep people at a distance. I think I'm cursed. My birth was not normal. Something went wrong. I'd long suspected this, and a couple years ago, after a particularly vicious fight with the intruders, they pulled my feet out from under me and I was at the very edge of the floor. I could feel the cold of the void on my back, and then it was 12 minutes and I was safe. I decided that I was going to figure out exactly what happened. I'd start with the only documentation easily available to me, my birth certificate. I went to my parents' house one day while they were out of town on a trip. They keep all their important documents in a lockbox and I got this out and opened it up. Inside were their passports, their birth certificates, copies of our social security cards. Underneath that were personal things, letters and photos and other irreplaceable mementos. I made sure to set everything aside in order, but I quickly lost track, as I had to dig through far more than I thought I would. My birth certificate was at the very bottom, the second to last document in the box. I wondered why they'd buried it there, when all the other identifying documents were within easy reach. I took it out, unfolded it, and read my birthplace. The time of birth, 12:12 a.m. Then I folded it and started to put it back in the box. My glance fell on the document underneath. Only one thing left inside, a yellowed envelope. On a whim, I picked it up. I'd already snooped through everything else. What was one more envelope, right? Inside was a death certificate. Same town. Same date. My name. 12 a.m. Was I stillborn? Was my soul fighting for the right to existence in those 12 minutes, just as I fight every year since? I don't know. I have my answer, I guess, but I don't know what to do with it. I have to keep thinking of how to stay ahead of the void that comes to claim me. Fighting them off is getting harder. There's too many of those hands and I can't shatter them all, so I started prioritizing. I keep my center of gravity low to maintain my balance and aim for the ones that are trying to grab my arms first, so that I can keep swinging my weapon. Then I try to knock off the ones grabbing my legs next. Last year I fought like a wild beast. My careful stance and preparations were forgotten. I couldn't simply hold my ground, not with the memory of that thing choking the breath out of me burned into my memories. I felt their fingers grazing my skin and it was like I was being burned as I thrashed wildly, desperate to shake them off. The pain was too much and I put my head down and I ran instead, because the darkness had not yet consumed the room and the door was still there, and the hallway beyond it, and I thought, this was it. This was the solution. I would flee instead of fight. I lay on my stomach in the street. My car was badly dented, but no significant damage from the impact. I drove it back home and stood in the shower, watching the blood from the cuts on my back where their fingers had pierced my skin run down the drain. And every year, my visitors have gotten stronger. I guess we're all trying to stave off death, in our own way. My fight is just, a little more literal. I was dead in those 12 minutes after midnight and something brought me back. Perhaps I fought my way out. But I think I was meant to stay dead, and perhaps this is just the grave's window of opportunity, once a year, trying to drag me back to where I belong. I took up running this year. I've been working for speed more than endurance. I only need to keep going for 12 minutes, after all. Hiding stopped working and now fighting is not enough, so I'm going to try flight. I'm going to run like death itself is on my heels, and it is, and maybe I can keep running every year after this until my body begins to fail with age and oblivion doesn't seem so unjust anymore. Next year.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
We'd already been driving for 7 hours. A long journey to get away from the dread of daily life. Hotel Skjersilden was our destination, an idyllic place miles away from civilization, hidden in the mountains, surrounded by nothing but nature. How do you even pronounce the name? Alice asked. She nodded, and went back to pointing out the amazing environment around us. ////. 5 hours later, we found ourselves traveling up a treacherous, mountain road. Though decayed, it provided us a beautiful view of the valley beneath. Before long, the peak of Hotel Skjersilden greeted us, and I let out a sigh of relief. Its architecture was magnificent, starkly contrasting the lush trees around it. The design was old, but it remained amazingly well kept, a staple from times long since past. I took a quick look over the beautiful structure, and nodded. There were a few elderly people sitting out on the porch. By the entrance stood a large, wooden sign that read, Hotel Skjersilden. Helping people rest since 1886. Hello, I have a booking for Alex Henson, I told the man behind the reception desk. Mr. Henson, yes of course. My name is Elazer Winchester, welcome to Hotel Skjersilden, he said as he pointed to a set of stairs. Let me show you to your room. We've situated you with a beautiful view of the mountain range. Mind if I ask you a question? Excuse me. I quickly freshened myself up, using the hotel-provided accessories, and got ready for dinner. Aren't you going to unpack? Alice asked as I headed for the door. Nah, I'll do it later. How about a drink, he asked. Maybe this is too presumptuous, but if you could get us a couple of caipirinhas? Alice asked. Hey, look at that guy, Alice said as she bobbed her head in the direction of a middle-aged man, dressed in a cheap suit. He looked stressed, frantically sucking on a cigarette as he went through a pile of papers. The fumes from his smoking filled the restaurant, and quickly got on my nerves. He went back to reading his files, and we continued our dinner. After a 3-course meal, we proceeded to get a couple of drinks at the bar. The man still sat at his table, mumbling something to himself, as he sipped on a glass of whiskey. He fumbled with an unlit cigarette, looking at it with longing eyes. I felt slightly guilty, having imposed my own rules on the man. If the hotel didn't have a policy against smoking inside, who was I to stop him? Slightly tipsy, I decided to engage with the stranger, while Alice went to freshen up. He hesitated for a moment, before igniting it with a vintage lighter. Thanks. So what brings you folks around these parts, he asked. Just needed a break from real life, I responded. What about you? Looks like you're not exactly following orders, I joked. I'm a journalist, I responded instinctively, before having to correct myself. Well, at least I used to be. He chuckled. As a detective, I guess I should thank you for quitting. He sighed, and closed his folder, sloppily shoving all the papers inside. But I can't get a grip on this tonight. Justice will have to wait. Enjoy your night. Slightly unsettled, we decided to call it a night. On our short journey to our room, we heard the faint sounds of a girl sobbing. With the dimly lit hallways, and the echoing walls, it was hard to pinpoint the exact origin. Alice had a big heart, sometimes too kind for her own well-being. But her willingness to help anyone in times of need was part of why I loved her. What happened to you? Are you hurt? Please, it's so cold. Despite her wounds, she didn't bleed. She just sat there and cried, barely able to breathe through her crushed chest. Before I got the chance to ask any more questions, I noticed the detective sitting down for breakfast. Thinking he could help, I decided to tell him about the situation. At the very least, he might be able to give me some insight. He was still holding on to the same folder from last night. On a piece of paper that stuck out, I noticed another date from 1978. Curiosity got the better of me, and I had to ask. But, it's from 1978. Without notifying the reception, we packed our bags and prepared to leave. On our way out the door, I glanced over at the same elderly ladies from when we arrived, still sipping tea. One of them was bleeding profusely from her eyes, nose, and ears, while another had turned pale as a sheet. Yet, they kept laughing and drinking, as if nothing had happened. I blinked, and they returned back to normal. Nothing, the engine simply refused to run. Fuck, what the hell is going on here? I asked, frustrated and afraid. Yes, the poor girl from yesterday. She's fine now, Mr. Winchester said. I don't understand, what happened to you? How did you recover so fast? Well, I don't remember exactly what happened. I think I was driving by the ocean, making my way back home after traveling the state. Then, I saw an animal, just standing in the road, a dog or something. I tried to swerve around it, but I somehow lost control. The car went off the road, and I landed in the water. It was so cold, and the car was sinking so fast. I couldn't even think. She thought about the question, trying her best to figure out an appropriate answer. I guess I didn't. Because Mr. Henson, may I have a word? He asked, as polite as ever. He pulled me to the side, and gave me a stern look. You mean you haven't figured it out yet? Look around you, Mr. Henson. Tell me what you see. With these words, it felt as if a thin veil had been lifted from my eyes. I looked over at the girl, and her injuries were back. Despite her smashed-in face, her broken ribs and arm, she sat calmly and read a book. I looked at another guest, dressed in a fancy, striped suit. He had a bullet hole in his head. Then, I glanced into the restaurant, where the detective sat, still reading his ancient file. His jacket was soaking wet, dripping with blood. Yet, he didn't seem to notice. I shook my head in despair, closing my eyes tightly. Once I opened them once more, everyone looked fine. They looked perfectly healthy, all of them, but I'd seen the truth. They're dead. The only question is, will you help us? Winchester asked. Help you how? Just talk to them, you'll figure it out. He was chasing down leads to capture a serial killer by the name of Lawrence Harrison. He was wanted for a string of murders occurring between 1975 and 1978, one of whom appeared to be the detective's partner. Using the landline, I called back home to request any news article about the case to be sent my way. It was an easy enough task with the connections I still had left over from my old job. Not just anyone can stumble upon this place. We have a few operatives out there in the real world, always working in subtle ways. Using as little as a simple brochure, they were able to nudge you in our direction. Following the quick call, it was a simple task. All I had to do was to show the detective that his never-ending case had been solved. I nodded. Locked up in December 1978, dead in prison by 1980. According to the news, it was a detective by name of Harold Finch that broke the case. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see the bastard face his day in court. 1980, but he trailed off. Next was the girl. I let Alice speak to her, using a more gentle touch. As it turned out, she'd fled home at the age of 15, and had since regretted her decision. She was on her way home to see her parents for the first time in 5 years, when her car went off the road. Though the head injury didn't kill her, she was too disoriented and hurt to get out. She drowned in the car, with no one there to save her. All she wanted us to do was to send a message. "I never should have left home," she said. There were still plenty of guests to go around. Alice and I made a great team, but to best aid their passing, we needed to ask Mr. Winchester for help. "No, I can't," I trailed off. I knew he was right. It was an undeniable truth I'd been denying for the past year. I looked over at Alice, her figure emaciated beyond belief, broken from the cancer that had killed her only a year ago. "Please," I begged. We returned to our room, neither of us speaking a single word on the way. "We had a great few years together, but I don't want you to stop living just because I'm gone." "But, you're not gone. It has been a year since," I trailed off. "I just don't understand why you're still here. We didn't exactly have any unfinished business." "Why not?" She smiled. "Because I already had a great life, with you." It was the simple truth I'd failed to accept. Despite our time together being unfairly short, it had been one filled with happiness. "We'll see each other again?" I asked. "Once your time comes, yes," she responded with a smile. Hours passed, and we went over each and every experience we'd shared. I held her, and she kissed me. "I'm sorry about the car. I just needed you to stay," she said. "That was you?" She nodded. All she'd left behind was a note, "Help them see the light." The decision had already been made. With the loss of my soulmate, I'd been given a new purpose in life. That following morning, I got dressed, and entered the lobby. Mr. Winchester smiled as he saw me approach the reception desk alone. He didn't have to say anything, I already knew what he would ask. He gave me one last chance to contact friends and family on the outside world, who will be uploading this story on my behalf. Once it was done, he asked me one final question. "Are you ready to get to work?"
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I'm a therapist, and my patient is going to be the next school shooter, by Dr. Harper. He'd fallen in love with a girl named Emma, and she didn't feel the same way. Typical high school heartbreak. The problem was, he wouldn't back off. He kept asking her out, and she kept rejecting him. When he came back the next week, he seemed much calmer, but that only made me more uncomfortable. I tried to casually comment that he seemed happier this week, and he told me that he had figured it all out. I asked him what that meant, and his only response was a slight smirk. You know that feeling in your gut, when you know something is terribly wrong, but you don't want to believe it? That's the feeling that keeps me up at night. I stuck my hand deeper into the bag and felt something. It was one of those old TI graphic calculators. I slid off the cover and tried my hardest to remember my algebra days from high school. PRGRM. That's where we used to goof around. Probably chemistry. Maybe the library, when she's on her free period with the other bitches. 3. You can't go through my stuff, he mumbled. Then he packed his bag and stormed out of the room. I called the police first. They came over to interview me and said they'd take the report very seriously. They asked if I took photos of the calculator. Nope. 5 more seconds would have made all the difference. Then I talked with the school. They said they'd work with the police to investigate. But last night, the police informed me that they had completed their investigation and found nothing of concern. We have our next session tomorrow, the last one before December 17th. Part 2 /.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
My mom made us knock before we entered every room, by As Death Beckons. All my life I have always done it. I was doing it from the days when I had begun walking and first started opening doors. Apparently, I always knock. And I don't mean out of politeness for the person on the other side. I mean, I knock on every door even if the room on the other side is empty. My mother ingrained this deeply in both me and my sister, Doris. I still remember going to school and being looked at strangely by the other kids every time I knocked on the restroom, classroom, or cafeteria doors. My sister and I looked at them strangely, too. Why the hell weren't they knocking before going in like everyone else? We continued our tradition even though we knew that we weren't like everyone else. When I was in 3rd grade, someone finally asked me why I knocked every single time, on every single door. I didn't have a legit answer for him, so I went to my mother with the same question. My mother, who looked older than her 32 years, glanced at me with ferocity in her eyes. Don't question me, child. Don't let those little hooligans at school get you into more trouble than you can possibly imagine. We knock because we must. That is all you need to know. Ask me that question again and see what happens. And so my sister and I adapted. We kept knocking, but we started to make a joke out of it. Eventually our classmates just came to accept it. Doris and I weren't weirdos or scopoths, we were just like everyone else, save for the knocking. And I hate to continue harping on, but when I say we did it without fail, we did it without fail. Sleepy and wandering to the bathroom late at night? Knock knock. 16 and drunk at a party, leading a girl to the bedroom about to get laid for the first time? Knock knock. It was as common as moving one step in front of the other. Something we would never forget. I met a girl named Perla in college and fell in love. We married and a couple of years later had our first child, a girl we named Dorothy. I remember my mother being as enthused and ecstatic as any other grandmother. Then came the day when she saw Dorothy walking for the first time. Her eyes weren't full of excitement or glee as I would have expected. No, instead she looked concerned. Derwin, I want you to start teaching my little angel to knock on doors. Don't worry, Mom, I will. Maybe not at my place, but what about when I take her to Mom's to visit? My mother came to visit us one evening. We had dinner and as Perla was washing the dishes, Mom watched Dorothy wander around the living room. Mom, listen. I'm glad you raised me the way you did, but dash. My daughter was standing with her hand on the doorknob to the bathroom. My mother dashed across the living room, the fastest I've ever seen her move, and grabbed Dorothy before she could twist the knob. She fell to the floor with my daughter in her arms as Perla ran up, looking startled. Really? What's going on in here? Mom, hand her to me. I declared angrily. Enough was enough. I took my daughter and looked down at my mother, who slowly rose to her feet, tears rolling down her face. Derwin, son, you have to listen to me. She must knock, just like you and your sister. My mother stared at me, seemingly lost for words. She opened her mouth but closed it again, shaking her head as she closed her eyes. My anger had gotten the better of me, and I decided that I would prove a point. For the first time in my life, I was going to open a door without knocking. What happened next will haunt me till my last day. And number X200B. PT2. And number X200B.
Whew, that one gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Something is Growing from My Husband's Back, by Vampiristars. /CW for brief mentions of sexual violence and self-harm /. I've tried posting this to so many different boards only for my cries for help to get deleted or laughed off as a joke. I don't know where else to go. Maybe somebody here knows something that can help. I don't want him to die before our daughter is born. I woke up freezing one night to find our bedroom window open and Leon sitting naked in bed, sweating bullets. We live in northern Manitoba, winters are no joke here, and it must have been at least -10°C that night. I shot up and climbed over to shut the window, hearing my husband groan in pain. "What's wrong, Lee?" I tried covering him back up but he pushed my hands away. "Not sure. Kidneys, maybe. My body feels like it's 1,000,000 degrees." His breathing sounded labored, yet he managed to squeeze out a low chuckle. "Stomach hurts, it's like something's trying to claw its way out of me." "You're soaked, hon, I'll grab you a towel, MK." A few minutes later, I returned with the promised towel, plus a thermometer, glass of water, and all the painkillers I could find. His temperature was normal, and when I put my hands to his neck and forehead to see for myself, all I could feel was his sweat, cooled by the wind flowing from the previously open window. I spent the night sat at his side, wiping the sweat off his face until I once again succumbed to slumber. He was up cooking breakfast by the time I got up. I gathered our bedding to toss in the wash and went to check on him. Yeah. That was weird. My stomach's still a bit grumbly, but other than that, I'm good. Huh. Weird. Now seems like a good time to mention that Lee and I are both scientists. I'm an entomologist and he's a pharmacist. We were skeptical about the cream and almost certain the pills were placebos, but he used both anyway just to see if it would help. It didn't. Over the 2 months that we spent bouncing from doctor to doctor, and the 2 additional months he spent using the medicine, the lumps had only started to grow. Day by day, they became waxier and stickier, more sensitive to touch and more painful when one cracked open. It got to the point that even wearing a shirt and feeling the fabric brush up against them caused Leon to flinch. When one of the lumps inevitably cracked again, I took a larger shard of the fingernail-like substance to examine. I know that this sounds like mad scientist bullshit, it felt crazy to me too, but for all I knew, my husband was sick and doctors couldn't help us. Obviously, I wasn't going to get anywhere staring at this shard and pondering. I'm a bug scientist. I know insects, not keratinous masses. At the same time, Leon took matters into his own hands and tried anything he could get his hands on to help. Every cream, pill, injection, serum, vitamin. Needless to say, if our experimenting worked, I wouldn't be writing here asking for help. The next 3 months were a blur. My first trimester was hell on my body and I was exhausted and bedridden more often than not. While I slept, Leon took to cutting the larvae out of his skin. He would come to bed with deep gashes in his arms and legs. Lee. Don't overdo it. I want these bugs gone too, I really do, but don't die before our baby is born. Don't die before you get to see her grow up. Why's that? Just a feeling. I cupped my swollen belly with my hands and sighed. Doesn't it hurt to cut them out? He chuckled and shook his head. Lee. What do you do with them once they're out? Lee dash. Of course, I'm not. He placed a hand on my belly and smiled. This is my only baby. The larvae are parasites. How's about we just go to bed, Kay? Like the jaws of a staple remover, the mandibles of the abnormally large beetle protruded from Leon's back. He stifled a scream as the exoskeleton scraped against the flayed skin and I stared on in horror as it dropped to the carpet with a thump, a trail of blood and larval slime stretching across my husband's back into the abdomen of the newly birthed creature. It was as long as my hand and its thorax seemed to heave as the first full breaths of oxygen ran through its trachea. Despite its size, the impossible stag beetle was no match for my bare heel crashing down as I stomped repeatedly, screaming wildly and disregarding the innards that splat and gushed into my carpet when I hit the insect just right. If we go to the hospital they'll see all these scars from the larvae and put me in a ward. Or worse, what if they think you did it to me? I don't think they'll believe that bugs are growing from my back. Claire, I've been hurt. You think these things haven't hurt from day one? You think it doesn't hurt to have something you never asked for growing under your skin?
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
I wrote a eulogy to give at my uncle's funeral. I didn't read it. Here it is, by Red Grin. The authorities found my uncle at the end of a rope, that much is certain. He hadn't shown up to work in 2 days, so his boss called my grandmother, who found my Uncle John dead in his one-bedroom apartment. His suicide note, which was written on a small piece of yellow loose leaf and was stained with brown liquid, simply read, "Don't follow him." Everyone agreed it was my uncle's handwriting, except me. I thought it looked a little off. The letter F, in particular. The top stroke looked too wavy. Not by much, but just enough to notice. And I would know, I knew my uncle best. But, like most things with Uncle John, the truth is a bit complicated. I planned on laying it all out at John's funeral. I composed the eulogy and shoved it in the back pocket of my black dress pants. But when the time came, I never took it out. Reading it didn't feel right. Below is what I wanted to say but couldn't. I guess I just wanted to get it off my chest. And, I'll just say it, in case you didn't know, growing up, I wanted to be like John. I looked up to him. He bought me my first bike, and he gave me advice on girls. Not the best advice, actually, it was spectacularly bad, but he tried. But as I got older, it was John's passionate search for truth that I really admired. We disagreed on things, sure. I believe in order, in a plan for us all, in a universe built on creation. I believe in God, and John, well, Uncle John did not. He wanted to, but he didn't. Don't follow him. At first, John didn't know what to make of it. He thought she was the result of too many late nights at the local watering hole. Too many trips to the gas station for another sixer. John just wished she'd go away, and he even prayed for her to go away, even though he was convinced that praying was useless. But the corpse always came back, and it was always with the same message, don't follow him. And belief was something that was lacking in his life. And this dead woman, this ghost, filled John with purpose. There was truth to be found. And, most importantly, if this spirit was coming to John, she must have had a specific reason. Some form of a connection to John. John sifted through obituaries going back decades. He searched for any drownings in a 20-mile radius, and when he didn't find what he wanted, he expanded that radius to 50, 100, then 200 miles. He analyzed photographs, spent days in public libraries scouring microfiche, and chatted up members of historical societies from across the state. He called police departments, and he combed through records of missing persons. John even contacted parents of runaway teens from all across the country. Don't follow him. I think it was because I didn't want to derail his journey to truth. But John's journey was ending. He didn't find any records of the young woman he was searching for. And slowly the girl's message became not about her danger, but about my uncle's. She was no longer bearing the truth about her own fate, but John's. She'd gone from a cursed visage to some form of a guardian angel. About a week before John died, he found him. John told me the whole story, chapter verse. There was a horrible blizzard, and my uncle was out in the middle of it. He was driving home late at night from a bar on a backcountry road. In John's words, he was only a little worse for wear. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on what that meant. The roads got bad in a hurry. John's car trudged forward, slipping and sliding its way towards home. Bad weather never deterred John's confident, some might call, aggressive, driving. There was no one else on the road, save a pair of headlights behind John that eventually vanished. John wasn't sure when or where. About 10 miles from John's apartment, the car began to sputter. He pulled off to the shoulder, and the car died. John had no phone, no blanket, his driver's side window was stuck halfway down, had been for 6 months, and John was too lazy to get it fixed, and the snow was piling up all around him. He considered going out on foot. It might have been his only chance to make it. But then John spotted a figure in the distance. It was slowly slogging through the blinding snowstorm, walking across a vast farmer's field, approaching John's car. A dot in the distance, slowly getting larger. John froze up. His reaction was sudden and immediate. This was the man, the him, that was coming for John. My uncle knew. Deep down to his core, he felt it. John was being tested. The young woman with the bloated, dead, and wet body had come to him for a reason. "You okay?" the man asked my uncle. John told me, and, I'll never forget this, that the man's voice was deep, like it had come from some unseen cavernous depth. "There's a gas station about a mile up the road," the man said. "I have an extra pair of gloves. We should get there before this gets impassable." The stranger grimaced. He stared at John fiercely. The man leaned in closer, and John knew he wasn't to be trusted. The stranger slipped his hand into his pocket, and he held it there. John's breath vanished for a moment. He waited for the man to pull out a knife or a metal hook, but all he removed was an extra pair of gloves. He handed them to my uncle. 20 minutes later, John's car miraculously started up. The snow on the road was at least 5 inches high and falling faster and heavier. John inched ahead, careful not to spin out on the rarely traveled back road. He drove a few miles when he realized he hadn't passed a gas station. The stranger had lied. John forged ahead, and a half-mile past the car he saw the body. It was lying face down on the shoulder of the road, half covered with snow. 5 minutes later, and the body would have been totally obscured. John stopped and rushed to the figure. He flipped it over, and he didn't even have to check his pulse. The man was dead. The second set of footprints led away from the corpse into the snow-covered cornfields. Curiosity bubbled inside my uncle again. John attended the frozen man's funeral. The message from the man's family was clear: he had finally found God, and the man had gone to a better place. The frozen man's sister gave a tear-filled eulogy, and in it she told a story how she'd been dreaming about her brother's death when it happened. Only in her dream, her brother been called home by the Lord, that an angelic figure had been with him in the snowstorm when he died. He had walked beside him, before easing her brother's soul into the great beyond. There was sadness for loss, but she was overjoyed that he'd finally found God. Because he had always been searching. When John told me this part of the story, his eyes dropped. A sense of absolute sadness and dread permeated his tiny apartment. He looked at me, and he said, "That dead woman tricked me. It was supposed to be me." By the time I got home, he was dead. I didn't read any of that. Not a word. Instead, I mumbled a few generic sentiments about how John left us before his time. It was impersonal, and it could have been about anyone, really. I awaited the woman's message, waiting for her to say words, the words that drove my uncle to the end of a noose. I pondered a future always on the lookout for the him that would enter my life one day, and the decision that would define my fate. But the corpse said nothing. All I heard was the plop 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 of the water trickling onto the floor. I pulled the covers over my head, and I stayed that way until first light. In the morning, she was gone. At least, the bloated and very dead version of the woman was gone. But she appeared to me in another form. Her picture was splashed across the front page of my local newspaper, which I found staring up at me at the end of my driveway. They looked like the eyes the dead woman would have. It's hard to explain. It's like I just knew. The woman's body had been dredged up the day before. She had been missing for weeks, and, after attending her funeral, I learned exactly why. Helen's best friend was in the passenger seat. She begged for Helen to slow down, to pull off, to do anything else than follow this car. But she did. Helen lost control, the car spun out and hit a tree, and the passenger flew through the windshield. Helen's best friend died that night, and Helen blamed herself, sinking deeper and deeper into depression over the next few months. She eventually threw herself off a bridge. I've awaited Helen's return every night since she first appeared to me. Maybe she'd gargle out her dying friend's words this time, but Helen hasn't come back. I don't think she will. I read that once a ghost's unfinished business is settled, they are able to fade away into the afterlife. Or something like that. I'm not sure what I believe anymore. What I do know is that Helen had been following a drunk man through a snowstorm that night, and she shouldn't have. Now people are dead, and I'm the one left holding the truth. I dream of having a family one day. If not, maybe a niece or a nephew. And I don't want them to know these truths. To not know what I know. If anyone looked up to me and aspired to follow my path, hopefully someone would warn them. 10.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
My name is Lily Madwip and I saw The Angel of Death, by Lillian Madwip. Yes, I took a bath last night. You brushed my hair, remember? Mom does that thing where she touches her chin like it activates her brain. Oh, now I remember. Well, you don't smell like you took a bath. That wasn't my fault. It never is, I hear her say to herself. I wonder if she believes it. Sometimes I wonder if I believe it. What about Dad? Dad stands up. I've got a lot to do around the house, starting with reseeding the backyard. Pachar tells me it'll be okay. I heard you made a new friend at school, Mom says as we finally walk to the store. Maybe. I don't want to talk about Meredith, because I might mention her burning people or her melted Barbie Nathaniel. Sometimes when I talk about things I just say stuff without thinking and then find out I shouldn't have said it. Maybe if I hadn't told Roger he was going to die he wouldn't have died. I got a call from your principal that you were in his office because of an altercation. I shake my head. Is that why we're at the mall? Are you going to abandon me here? That's not true. I don't think I'm growing at all. We have a chart on the inside of the kitchen doorway where Mom and Dad used to have Roger and me stand up straight, and they made a mark with a pencil and then wrote our name and age to show our height. I don't think mine has moved an inch in over a year. Roger's last measurement was back in August. Sometimes Dad stands there and stares at it and gets real sad, then goes and works on a dirge. We walk by the food court. There's like 100 kids waiting to ride the carousel. I hope they clear out by the time we come back, because I like to get on and ride and then run back in line and get on the next time over and over until Mom makes me stop. The longest I pulled it off was a half an hour. I only had $5, but the girl who was working the carousel told me that I was such a good customer that I got my next ride for free as long as it was my last. Oh shoot, I didn't loot my piggy bank before we left. I forgot my money. I tell Mom. She is being highly suspicious with her generosity. Normally if I forget to bring money I'm SOL, as Mom says. That stands for something bad, but I didn't say the S word so it doesn't count. I'm still not allowed to say SOL though, at least to other people. There's a lady with 4 little kids hanging onto her dress and she's carrying a tray of food. She's going to trip over one of the kids and spill all the stuff on her tray that she just paid for. Like any second now. Oh God, maybe I should help her, but what if I run over and startle her and she trips and spills the stuff anyway? Then it's my fault instead of her kid's fault. I don't want to get in trouble. Nobody's going to get seriously hurt. It's just going to be loud and there's going to be yelling and crying. Sometimes I wish I couldn't see things before they happen. Let's hurry. I grab Mom's sleeve and try to pull her past the food court to get away before it goes down. What on earth is your hurry? She asks. Then the lady trips behind us and Mom turns to look at the commotion as the tray bangs on the floor and a soda spills on her kid's head and he starts crying and she shrieks in panic and everyone's stopping and looking except me because I already saw it happen. I think Mom pieces together a bit that my rush had something to do with the lady spilling her food, but she comes to the wrong conclusion. No, what do you mean? She goes back to convincing herself that things are normal. Never mind. I just thought, nothing. It's not just me either. Other people are looking around kinda confused. I see a guy on his cell phone and his lips are moving, but then he holds the phone up to look at it like it burned him and he adjusts his necktie and seems to cough, but there's no sound, so he starts talking really loud and it maybe sounds like a muffled shout. Where did the sound go? After we pass a kiosk selling phone cases the sound comes back. It feels like being trapped in a soundproof box and then kicking the lid off and finding yourself in a dinner party. Mom stops, still holding my hand, and looks at me. She ignores what I said. How strange. She's going to come up with some explanation for what just happened, I know it. She always does. Sometimes I think I could melt the car with my brain and she'd tell me it must have been sunspots or something. I can't actually melt the car with my brain. I can't even pop popcorn. Maybe when we go back to the food court, I can have some popcorn. Only now I kinda don't want to go back to the food court. There's something strange going on there. Can we look at the pets before we shop? I beg. Please. Mom looks across the mall at a makeup store. I'll tell you what. I'm going to step into Sephora. You can look at the animals, but don't touch. When I'm done in there, we go get you some new clothes. Deal? We'll see what time it is when we're done. Now I have to weigh my options. Do I go look at the kitties first, because they're so cute? Or do I go look at snakes because I know if I am looking at them last when mom comes back, she'll see them and any chance of negotiating a new pet goes right out the window. I don't really need to see the snakes. They're cute when they're small, but some get big and they can eat you. I don't know how big the garter snakes get. I think I heard about a snake getting flushed down the toilet and growing to the size of the sewer pipes. They made a movie out of it called Anaconda or something. I'm going to look at turtles in the back first, because those are my safest bet for getting a new pet, and if I look at puppies last, I know mom will say no, but then I can ask to show her the turtles, already have one picked out, and she'll say yes to that just because it's not a puppy. There's a big turtle who I could totally name Leonardo. I just gotta make sure he never learns what happened to Donatello and Raphael, otherwise he might not want to come live with me. I don't know what any of that means, but they sound urgent. Everybody's clearing out of their way as they run down the mall. Her radio squawks a response that I can't hear and then they're both out of sight. The rest of the people in the pet store start talking to each other all at once about if anybody knows what's going on. I see mom across the way in the entrance to Sephora, and she looks at me, then back down the way the EMTs ran, then back at me, waves, and goes back inside. Something bad is coming. I feel it. It's not a knowing, like I usually do. It's a feeling. I don't know what it is, but there's something strong and angry and it's coming. I've never felt something like this before, and it scares me. I back into the pet store, bumping into a shelf full of bags of dog treats. Now I have to pick them all up because I always pick up after myself. Stupid dog treats. I didn't do it. I whisper. Why are they looking at me like that? Why are all the pets lying down? Why is the snake lying so limp on its branch? Why aren't the puppies moving? None of the puppies are moving. It's my fault. It's all my fault. It's all. Everything gets silent, all the people standing around, still talking about the EMTs who ran past are talking to each other, but I can't hear them. They sound like they're on the other side of a wall from me. They slowly start to look confused as everything goes quiet. The lady looks at her feet, or where they should be. Then she looks up and sees me looking at her. She's confused, but she also seems suspicious. I think she knows I'm seeing what she's seeing. She starts toward me. I am going to owe the swear jar so many quarters. Run, child, it says. I cannot stop her. She doesn't understand. Who are you? I yell, but nothing comes out of my mouth. I am Duma, it says, we're not here for you. You must run. We cannot be this close to each other. Run. The lady is closing the distance between us. She can't hear it. She can't hear the voice. She sees me trying to scream but nothing is coming out and she's marching toward me to do something to me. Maybe she thinks she's going to help me. I think she's going to kill me. She's only feet away. The man at the kiosk with the glasses seems to get dizzy and stumbles back, clutching his arm. All the animals in the pet store have stopped moving. Everybody's pointing at them and some of the employees are pushing past customers to see what's happening. Nobody's making a sound. There's no sound at all, it's like a silent movie. Some lady is holding a puppy and it's flopped still in her arms and she's petting it and I don't think she realizes yet that it's dead. They're all dead. My mom comes out of her makeup store just in time to see me run past. I look at her and hope that I'm looking sufficiently scared for her to get the message and understand why I'm running. She mouths my name, but no words come out. Then she looks across the thoroughfare at the pet store and sees the commotion going on over there. I don't wait to explain, I just keep running, pushing my way past groups of people, trying to outrun the black fog snakes that are all over my feet and legs. "What happened, sweetie?" she asks gently. She doesn't usually sound so genuinely concerned. She hugs me, but she doesn't say anything. I can feel her start to cry and she squeezes me. I don't know if she believes me or not. I didn't kill the animals, I swear. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. I cry too and hug her back. I think deep down I don't believe myself. If I hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened. Vilma said it. We can't be this close to each other. We'll just order you new clothes online, how does that sound? Mom asks as we watch the ambulances race through a red light. I know you didn't, Lily, she tells me. When we get home, Pachar is not on the dining room table. I go up to my room to see if Dad moved him to my bed, but he's not there either. Dad is outside, pulling up some of the weeds and dandelions from Mom's garden. I go outside and wait for him to take a break. He doesn't like it if you try to talk to him when he's focused on a task. You can talk to me, honey.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah. That's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
If you drank a Red Bull within in the past 90 days, I sincerely hope you're feeling well. But I am afraid for you. I won't write my name, for fear of what they'd do to me if they found out I'm writing this. I'll call myself Zed. I worked at one of the Red Bull production factories in Austria for more than 7 years. It was a good job. It helped me provide for my wife and children. Most who worked there were Austrian natives, but I am from a Western country, again, can't name it. I visited Austria as a young man, met my wife, and never left. It wasn't what my family back home wanted for me, which is probably why we speak so little. But I was a high school dropout trying to find his way in life. I bummed around Europe for 2 years just crashing on couches or spending the occasional night in a park. I got used to doing odd jobs for money and blowing it all on beer. But when I met my wife, I felt something changed inside me. I promised her I would no longer be the useless bastard I was before. I would hold a steady job and become a man. A good man. That is partially why I'm writing this. If I were back in the old days, I would have let this information go. It didn't affect me, so why should I care? But I'm a better person now. What I know could have a lasting impact the lives of millions. I have no choice but to share this. Our Red Bull facility is unique in that it both produces the liquid for Red Bull and bottles it all in one place. They most likely did this to save on transportation costs. I worked in the bottling portion of the factory. It wasn't very exciting to say the least. I would stand next to a conveyor belt, the cans would move forward, the liquid would pour in, and the tops would put on last. My job was to basically watch this whole process day after day and make sure nothing went wrong. And nothing did go wrong for 7 years. Sure, we had pile-ups and spills, but that was ordinary. What happened in September was far worse. The first time it came up was on just a typical day. I remember making pancakes for the kids and my wife sleepily kissing me goodbye as I left for work. Everyone was tired, as usual. I took my spot on the line, waiting for the whole process to begin. No bulls for the product. The urine, I mean. They had to use pigs. He tapped his fingers on the metal of the conveyor belt. He rolled his eyes. Urine. For the product. That's a myth, I joked at him. No, it's true. They don't use as much as they did in the beginning, too expensive, but it's still in there. Every last yellow drop. But the bulls they use weren't enough for this shipment. They had to mix it in with something else. That's why they got the pigs. He looked around and then whispered, I heard they have something wrong with them. Before I could figure out what was happening, a supervisor instructed 2 men to take her away. He told us she had a seizure disorder. He said it was normal. Nothing to be afraid of. I dreamt of the squiggles in her eye. I was standing in the break room, except one of the walls had been replaced with a huge eyeball. One curly line began climbing up the eye, scooping bits of viscera as it ascended. Then 2 more followed. The lines started to come into focus. They looked like white snakes, except blood streaked their long bodies. One of them poked its head from the wall of the cornea, staring at me with its expressionless face. It had no mouth, but I swear it smiled. I woke up in a sweat, breathing shallowly. I could still hear Julia screaming even as I was awake. They're in my brain. The big boss got in front of a microphone and spoke. His voice was calm but threatening. You may have heard a rumor of something contaminating the product. This is simply not true. You will not be infected if you drink Red Bull. No one has died from it. Any gossip about infection is a lie. If you are caught discussing this lie, you will be terminated immediately. Any questions? The way he said any questions was not actually a question. It was a statement. It was a conclusion to his small speech. None of us said a word. Another supervisor stepped to the microphone. His voice was much more timid. At this time we are no longer allowing employees to drink product off the line. You may purchase Red Bull on your own time, but not during work. This is non-negotiable. He shook a little. How would you like to be a supervisor? Twice the pay and much less work. He faked a smile. We need talent like yours. Plus you speak perfect English. This is a plus for us. I don't know what to say, I responded in confusion. I have not been completely honest with you, whoever is reading this. Although I do wish to hide my name, it is not because of what the company will do to me. It is because of what I will be doing tomorrow. You see, the folder they handed me was a detailed description of how I was to take the blame for everything that happened. I was to pretend to be a high-ranking supervisor at the plant. I would admit to allowing untested ingredients into the Red Bulls that were shipped to North America. I would explain that the company had no knowledge of this, and that it was my fault alone. It was presented as a choice, but I knew it wasn't really. If I said no to them, the best scenario would be losing my job. The worst would be ending up like Stefan. I couldn't do that to my wife, to my kids. I wanted to be a better man, but I loved them more than I loved my own reputation. But before I do all of this, I want you to know what happened to those who drank the infected product. I need to tell someone, especially those of you in North America. Because maybe it will happen to you. If you're reading this and feel a headache coming on, or if you can see a small speck in the corner of your eye, I'm sorry. To tell the brutal truth, you might as well already be dead.
You're still tuned to Horus Lop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Part 2. Part 3. A man walked over to me, his hair was matted with filth and the rain streaked down his mismatched leather clothes. He said nothing, just watched me squirm on the floor. Please, I gasped. Help me. That's the one rule of hell, the strong take from the weak. Get used to the idea and you might just make it through the afterlife. I'm going to give you a helping hand. Consider this your handbook to hell, a primer on the inferno. Make no mistake though, I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart. When you die, you'll owe me one. Don't worry about trying to find me, I guarantee we'll run into each other eventually. Eternity is a long fucking time, so it's a matter of when rather than if. Do as I tell you and you'll have a better chance than most of avoiding my own nasty introduction to the pit. An NBSP. Some people swear they saw a light at the end of the tunnel when they died. To my mind, those people either hallucinated or they're lying. Most of us just wake up in a birthing sack a few minutes after death. The buildings of hell are covered in the things, horrible, yellow-brown pimples growing out of the brick. If you manage to break free of your sack, don't waste time moping around, wondering what the fuck happened. Get on your feet and get ready to defend yourself. Chances are good that the first person who sees you will be hungry. There are no plants or animals in hell, so cannibalism is your only option if you don't fancy starving to death and having to start over. Aim to kill the first person you see. It might take a few tries. Most of hell's residents have been fighting for survival a lot longer than you. They might have armor made from tanned skin, scavenged metal and bone. They'll almost certainly have a shiv, club or axe. All of that will be useful to you if you can take it from them. So, we've killed our first man and found a home. Things are going well. Get that far and you're going to want to hang on to what you have forever. You won't. Something will kill you eventually and you'll have to start over. My record is a year. If you want to beat that, you'll need to understand hell and its denizens. An NBSP. Residents have an easier time of it for sure, and all of them will fight to retain their resident status for as long as they can. Make no mistake though, residents victimize each other just as much as they prey on the fresh meat. If you're a woman for instance, well, you better get over any hang-ups you have about rape. Women get raped in hell far more than men, it's just a fact. If you're not one of those bodybuilders or warrior women, do the smart thing and prostitute yourself for protection. Self-respect doesn't keep you breathing. If you live long enough and fight well enough, you might get invited into one of the resident tribes. These are groups of people who band together for the sake of safety in numbers. Believe me, being part of a group makes things a lot easier in hell. However, keep in mind that you're only part of the tribe for as long as you're a resident. Get yourself killed and it's back to being fresh meat. Tribes offer the closest thing to civilized society you'll find in hell. If you're part of a tribe, you have people on your side who probably won't kill you unless shit gets rough. Doesn't sound like much, but that's about as good as it gets. My own survival record was thanks to getting into a tribe. Life was good for a while there. We had about 50 soldiers and plenty of girls to fuck. Nobody could touch us and the men abided by an honor code, so the usual fear of being stabbed in the back by your friends wasn't too much of an issue. I could have spent my eternity in reasonable comfort, but hell has ways of fucking over a good thing. An NBSP. The city and the wasteland. Most of the damned live in Dis, the city of hell. That's where all the fresh meat is born, and considering the size of the place coupled with the short life expectancy, a lot of people will spend eternity without ever setting foot outside of Dis. Dis is surrounded by a wasteland called Gehenna. At first glance, it doesn't look like much, just an empty expanse of gray stretching out into infinity. Sometimes the damned lose that fire in the belly, the will to survive, and set off wandering into Gehenna. Most of them never come back. I stepped back into the city and my body finally fell apart. When I emerged from my birthing sack, I swore never to step foot into Gehenna again. An NBSP. Escaping from hell. An NBSP. There are ways to leave hell. That should be obvious, otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you, would I? You haven't seen the true nature of man until you've watched thousands of the damned swarming over each other, kicking, biting and clawing to be the one who escapes. Contacting the dead always results in a bloodbath. Even the most civilized tribes fall apart the instant it becomes clear that only one of them can leave. I've left hell twice now, left my body behind and ridden that pillar of fire up into the clouds. Sooner or later, we take things too far. Our host dies or their family cave and recruit an exorcist, then we're fresh out of the birthing sack and on the streets again.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
Remember those sleepover games? That was it. Bloody Mary, Three Kings, Charlie Charlie. I was obsessed. I invited friends over all the time to play with. Everyone I knew had chickened out at least once, but not me. Nothing was too scary for me. I never screamed when Ouija boards answered. I didn't flinch during concentrate. I was the brave one. I tried to get scared. That was the last time I'd be happy. At about 11, the birthday girl came downstairs. She carried a bag of chips. Her eyes were sparkling with a look I knew well. She had a game to play. I snorted. What kind of a name is that? You, she whispered. Oh. I looked up at her and grinned. Wow, Anne, I didn't know you felt that way dash. Oh my God, stop, and groaned, but she was smiling. You're killing the mood. The game requires a minimum of 2 people. It's preferable that they're women, but it works for others as well. 1, the witch, covers the maid's ears. The witch then has to say their biggest secret out loud. Obviously, the maid wouldn't normally hear it. However, the game lets them hear certain syllables. Those syllables form part of a demon's name. I raised my eyebrows. This was new. I craned my neck to look up at her. And the whole name? Ooh, sounds fun. I settled my head onto her lap. Let's go. At first, there was nothing. Just indistinct mumbling. I was about to call bullshit. Wah. And then, her hands were off of my ears. I sat up. And watched me eagerly. 5, I guess. I stretched my neck. How much time, doctor? And sighed. Not time, steps. Anyways, she thought for a second, you have 20 steps. Ah, shut up, and snorted. Anyhow, who's next? Everyone was eager to participate. Respectively, they got 50, 80, and 20. The last one gave me a fist bump over having the same number. Then, it was N's turn. You're not the one with 20 steps left, I mocked. And laughed and came over. Once we were all settled, I covered her ears. Right. A secret. That made me stop. When I'd said ta, it hadn't sounded like me. I looked up. Nobody seemed to have noticed. I swallowed but kept going. Aha, right, I said. I started crying and as he said, Mom, help, I'm gonna die, I took a second to clear my throat. I'd reached the limit of my syllables. The other girls immediately clamored. Wait, how many steps? I asked. Dread was growing in my stomach. I'd guessed the number of syllables correctly. I went white. Anne, I don't think dash. Her face lit up. Oh, Am I gonna die? She stood up and dramatically took a step. Look, I'm throwing my life away. She took 3 more steps. I grabbed her leg. And, stop it, I pleaded. I'd never been that scared. This isn't fun anymore. Step. Blood spewed from her mouth. Within seconds, we were all covered. It was still warm. Metallic. Red. Someone screamed. We were all marked for death. The girl I'd fist bumped earlier, the one with 20, used her steps running upstairs for help. Her blood poured back down like a river. The one with 50 made it upstairs, but she only managed to scare Anne's mother before her steps were up. That poor woman got covered. 80 was smarter. She saved her steps for the walk to the cop car. Sadly, she didn't make it much farther than that. Me. I don't want to live like this anymore. Count your steps.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
Why I Removed All the Doors from My House, by Richard Saxon. I truly loved my grandma, but I didn't visit her often, my mother wouldn't let me. To her, the house had an uneasy atmosphere, one full of malice, as if an unknown and frightening entity loomed over the place. It didn't help that we lived several hours away, making it difficult for Grandma to visit us, with her advancing age and declining health. It made me sad that she lived all alone in such a big, old house, but she didn't seem to mind it. I'm not alone, she would say, our love kept us together, even after he passed. I knew she was talking about my grandpa, her late husband. However, she mentioned several figures that kept her company, people I assumed were her own parents, and even some who could have been siblings. Back in her day, people remained at home to die, spending their last moments with loved ones, comfortable at home in their own beds. Because of that, a multitude of different people had drawn their last breaths in her very own house. Her last will and testament arrived a couple of weeks later. By that time, I hadn't seen her in years, and the sight of the papers made me feel a bit guilty. There wasn't much of a personal message left behind, but it was stated that my mother would inherit all of her belongings, everything save for her house, which was left to me. I don't remember much from the night itself, just that I woke up to strange sounds and a shattering window. I wasn't a particularly brave man, but if my family was put at risk, I'd do whatever I could to defend them. I grabbed the baseball bat I was planning to gift Alex for his 10th birthday, and went to investigate in the dark. Before I could even turn the corner, I felt a sharp pain shoot through my chest, as one of the intruders lodged a knife in between my ribs. I fell to the ground, unable to breathe, and unable to move my legs. I tried to call out for my wife, to warn her about the approaching men, to give her a chance to get the kids and run, but my lungs had filled up with blood, and I couldn't get a single coherent word out. I guess they didn't bother double-checking, or maybe the pool of blood I'd produced around me made me look dead, but despite their best efforts at exterminating my family, I had somehow survived. I awoke as the ambulance rushed me to the hospital, and I cried for my family as they prepped me for surgery. I didn't know that they'd all been killed yet, I still had hope. As for myself, the stab wound had been deep, so much so that the knife had partially damaged my spine, enough to leave me with limited use of my legs and left arm. It would take months of rehabilitation before I could even go back home to an empty house. As soon as I confirmed it was her voice, I hopelessly barged in through the door, distraught to find it empty on the other side, filled with nothing but an empty bed, and a closet full of clothes never to be worn again. For a second, I'd felt a grain of happiness, but it was swiftly taken away as her serene voice vanished in the darkness of night. I collapsed to the floor, and cried for the first time since their deaths. I'd been so numb that my ability to feel had simply shut down, but the overwhelming emotion I felt from hearing my wife again, finally broke me. That heartbreaking belief lasted until the next night, when I awoke to laughter coming from Alex's bedroom. "Alex?" I said again with tears in my eyes. It was the moment the killers entered our room to murder her. Then, I heard cries coming from Alex's room. He'd been awoken by Alice's screams, and wanted to find out what was going on. His cries were quickly shut up as one of the intruders entered his room and slit his throat. I heard a short whimper before he too fell silent. Last in line was Amanda, but I quickly opened the door before I could be tortured by the sounds of her frantic screams as the intruders ended her life. Until that point, the house had always spoken to me with voices from the past, but then, something more sinister had approached, something that hadn't yet happened.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
I need help. But not badly enough that you should read this if you're like Clara. That is, if you're still being swallowed whole by your eating disorder, this is not an uplifting tale that is going to pave your way to recovery. Head over to Wholesome Memes or something. Let other people figure me out. Clara is tall and buck-toothed and made me homemade pasta every Friday night. She sings tenor and somehow finds time to read 2 fantasy books every week. She still steps into the bathroom to change in the morning, casting her eyes back over her shoulder to be sure I'm not watching. She's heard voices for years now. Mostly, though, they're kind. Clara tells me she doesn't hear them anymore. But sometimes I catch her in the sunroom. Frozen, head cocked to the side, silhouette bathed in light. That's the kind of life we had. One with a room that existed for the sole purpose of capturing light. Within it a beautiful woman, head tilted over her novel bound in green leather. It started like this. I was supposed to meet Annabelle for our 3rd date. I had been assured by numerous movie previews and glimpses of women's magazine at the grocery store checkout line that tonight, after a humiliating 2.5 decades, I'd be able to stop lying about my virginity. I arrived at the bookstore, swallowing with the mere thought of later tonight. Tormenting myself with last-minute variations on how to extend that invitation to her, the reciprocal agonies of either her acceptance or laughing refusal. I saw Annabelle in my favorite dress, a short black one. I walked up from behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. I hoisted her into the air, a move that left Annabelle in peals of laughter. I apologized until, sorry, stopped sounding like English. I offered her an expensive latte in compensation, wary of making her feel pressured into spending time with me, attacked a second time in a smaller way. Clara froze and eyed me up and down. I kept my eyes directly on her face. Like a sergeant expressing approval for the perfect shot, she inclined her head slightly, once. I bought her an apple cider chai and toffee bread pudding, per her request. She relaxed into the wooden chair like it was a thick mattress. She ate the entire massive bread pudding without hesitation or shyness. We started chatting. Clara was funny and shy and had a disorganized smattering of freckles across her nose. It was a libido-baffling combination of sexy and endearing. We both loved Harry Potter and horror movies. We'd both lost our dads in elementary school. We were both the oldest of many siblings. We both read cooking blogs when we woke up each morning. Annabelle never showed. She blocked my number the next day. She was what my grandma would have termed flighty. I lost my virginity on our wedding day, 3 years later. We walked out of the range and I taught her the difference between the sounds of a northern flicker and a pileated woodpecker. She pretended it was interesting. I pretended I hadn't attended 2 rallies against gun ownership the year before. Oh, I don't know. She cracked a tiny smile that showed the gap between her front teeth in all its inexplicable glory. They haven't studied the strand you have yet. I'm adopted. How do you feel about that? That isn't quite all, she sighed and finally spoke. There'd been an incident in her childhood. Apparently there was neither sufficient evidence nor funding for anything beyond feeble suggestions for parenting plans and counselors. He'd asked for a wellness check and the heavy-lidded officer had found her bleeding on a couch, completely silent. My mom says he was a guardian angel. I send him a Christmas card every year. He'll be seated with family at our wedding. They told me God had saved me from that life and delivered me to a new one. That was the best news I had ever heard. I didn't know what to say. The worst thing that had ever happened to me was my brother selling my baseball cards in middle school. She told me that no one was sure if she could even have children. And that while her mom and dad were her parents in every way that mattered, some things breed true. I hear voices too. I told her it didn't matter. So before you jump aboard calling me a piece of shit. I know. But I guess I thought we could get through anything together. Being with Clara required a lot sometimes. I thought it was okay if I asked something big of her in return. Clara had always said she wanted to start trying for children when she was 30, so that I have time with you all to myself for a while. I smiled at the shy yet eager way she approached me. But I get to be the father, right? Best looking family in the neighborhood, Clara agreed. Clara shifted nervously on her feet, sliding back and forth. It doesn't have to be now, I told her. I'm not upset. The test was negative. Some women have a bad reaction, she'd warned me. I might get a little testy while I'm adjusting. Our sex life, through the force of sheer and stupid luck, was wonderful. She was flattered by my constant desire and receptive at least daily. She had no shame or nervousness when she undressed before me. I loved the arch of her hip bones and the dimples of her back. When we were together it was loving and possessive all at once. I'm not trying to brag. I'm trying to explain. It was that simple. I never thought I was shallow. I would have bet you a lifetime savings that the way I felt about her was basically unrelated to the pleasing way her back tapered into her ass. That's what I would have thought. Clara couldn't calculate a tip without using her phone, but with people she was as sharp as one of those knives that used to be for surgeons but are now for weekend butchers as well. It may have had something to do with how she grew up, the easy way she could sense the subtle current shifting beneath people. My wife was wise if not precisely clever. For a moment I was furious. Obviously we couldn't have a baby right now. Obviously nothing but her sweatpants fit anymore. She was supposed to be able to assemble this information and perform the correct action with no input of mine. She'd gained 50 pounds after the birth control switch and it bothered me. A lot. I didn't think. I was driving home the next day. I called her on the hands-free phone. "Hey, babe," I said. Clara greeted me. I asked if she'd been sleeping and she said that she hadn't. "Oh, I'm okay. I'm not really in an ice cream mood," she said levelly. "I'm okay," she said in that exact same tone. I tried again. "Clara," I told her. "You don't have to be okay. I dumped this whole thing on you out of nowhere and we've never had any serious issues before. You're not chewing my balls off because you're a saint, but you can be mad or disappointed or something. Try." I whispered back. "Please." For the first time ever, she hung up on me. I felt much better. I felt like I wasn't trying to carry a giant Pacific octopus with me everywhere I went anymore. I wasn't thinking. I asked, "What kind of pasta do you want to make tonight?" "I'm feeling some gorgonzola ravioli." "I'll get it started." "Let's have some salmon, instead," she whispered. "No, I'm better at it," she muttered, gaze listing strangely off to the right. "You are," I told her and then paused. "But could I please make you some dinner?" Clara flinched visibly when I took my hand off of the wheel to squeeze hers. "So if we pay extra you can shoot a bunch of old TVs with an assault rifle." She paused long enough to make me nervous. And then I said a very unfunny thing. "Are we going to get through this? I mean, I know I hurt you badly and you don't need to decide right now, but do you think we get through this?" When we arrived she unloaded clip after clip into a television, until it was only slim pieces of black plastic heaped against each other, bound only by gravity. Clara paused and considered. "No, thank you," she responded in that prim way she has. On our way back she thoughtfully pinched the roll of fat that spilled out over the top of her jeans. It hadn't been there 6 weeks ago. "We can't afford all this stuff." I just stopped buying myself morning coffees and any new clothes or lunch out with my coworkers. She hesitated and I read into it. "Well, at least I hope that you know that. I would never take money from our house or from our future child or from you." Clara tilted her head to the side, listening to someone I couldn't hear. It took me a moment to catch up with the topic change. "Okay. I'll do that too, then, since you shouldn't be the only one putting all of this effort in." I was excited to have sex with. Then I swallowed that down and met her panicked eyes. "Maybe it's time to see a doctor, then," I told her softly. "Thank you for trying so hard. I'm really sorry for needing this," I answered. "Time for a different doctor, I think," I told her. That one sounds like a lot of words I was taught not to use in liberal arts college. She's all of them. But what if she's right? I paused. Right how? You're trying your hardest and it isn't working, so clearly we don't have all of the information. You're not fat dash. Because of what I'm eating. What if I'm just someone who has to be fat or who has to be hungry all of the time? I didn't ask if she was still taking her medications. It would have been like asking if the sun still rose. I felt her sigh against me. I got the implant out last month. It could take months for the hormones to clear out. No, you are. She replied, but it sounded like she'd started sobbing again anyway. It was a Friday when she oh so casually mentioned that that wouldn't work anymore, that she'd started a lunchtime program for students struggling with fractions. To me, surrounded by second graders who had not yet learned how to form shapes into syllables, that sounded like an eternity. Dinner we still had together nearly every night. I just didn't understand that it was her only meal. I opened her calorie counter app on a nosy impulse. I flipped open my own app, which I used religiously as yet another unasked for offering of love, hoping I could pour enough to fill the hole I'd left her with. I tried to ask her about the next day. So I was using your phone for something yesterday and I noticed your calorie counter app. I explained, haltingly, that I'd done some research and it suggested that no one ever go below 1,300 calories a day. And even then it shouldn't be for long. I thought we told each other everything and it hurt finding out that that was something we'd only used to do. And late that night, I found her in the sunroom, face tranquil and head cocked. Our scale alleged it was smart, so I used it to track her progress. Not to see if she was making any, I would have given her the rest of our lives. To see if she was as sick as I was making out. Clara had tried to say that she was going out for dinner with a work friend, that she was going to go to Zumba, but I insisted. Friday night was when we made dinner together. Since it seemed impossible to recreate our old clothesless, maybe our old routines could be a start. She ate 2 cubes of cheese, 3 cups of arugula and a dainty, small plum. She looked down at me. For what? I've never looked better. Her elbows were sharp and jagged, like they were trying to escape from skin. Her arms were covered with a fine, bizarre down that we both pretended not to notice. Clara did not find the time to sit down with a medical professional who would explain she was murdering herself. "I'll ask the attending for facility recommendations," he finally offered. Jeffrey paused for a long time. Once she hits a certain weight she can be admitted involuntarily. By police officers. "I'm not eating that," she said matter-of-factly. "That's got way too many carbs." And she got up and walked away. I could have counted the vertebrae prominent from beneath her running shirt, but I did not want to. On our wedding anniversary, I scooped a tiny quarter cup of half-baked into the bowl. My days passed by in a haze of equally unproductive worrying and begging. I'd called doctors and police departments and they all told me it hadn't gone far enough yet. Clara put down the book she'd been reading and blinking at me, eyes looking enormous in her sunken face. "Stephen, we need to use things that aren't food to celebrate. That's just paving the way for more bad habits. It's just a tiny bit." "Stephen," she said with a tiny hiss. I said no. "I love you." I told her, "I love you so much and I am so scared." "I love you too," she told me, eyes drifting back to her novel. "And there's nothing to be afraid of." I awoke that weekend to an empty bed. I rose to find her, my right arm and moral compass and most utterly unexpected and undeserved gift. I knew in my churning gut it was bad. I found my wife in the pantry. Clara looked up at me guiltily. She cringed like she was expecting to be struck. The shelves of cereal and dry pasta were in perfect order, utterly untouched. I opened my mouth. I inhaled to tell her how proud I was that she was eating something and that I didn't give a single fuck if she took every meal for the rest of her life in our cellar at prime-numbered hours. An odd smell clung to the air. A butcher knife lay on the floor, streaked with long strips of blood and an irregular smear of grease. I opened the door a little wider and the light rushed in to expose a dark puddle steadily expanding across the linoleum floor. Her right hand guided more into her mouth where she labored to chew it. Her other clutched her stomach tightly. "I was just so hungry," she murmured around her mouthful. "I figured this way, the calories don't count."
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
What Happens When You Write to Satan Instead of Santa, by Life Estrangement. Part 2. Part 5. Still, I don't know what I'd do without her. She's just started kindergarten in the fall and the days feel strangely quiet without her screaming. But just when my life was beginning to get peaceful, she managed to get up to trouble again, and this time the solution isn't as simple as keeping the sprinklers off. If I leave them on, she always seems to find a way out to the front yard. It all started with Ms. Frazzle. Ms. Frazzle is the kind of woman who starts wearing Christmas sweaters with cat hair all over them at the beginning of November. And she decided that since her favorite holiday was merely a month and change away, she was going to have the students write letters to Santa Claus. Ordinarily that would be fine, but as Ms. Frazzle's teaching abilities don't quite match her enthusiasm for cats and candy cane-flavored liqueur, the students' letters got sent out with some spelling errors. As far as I can tell though, my daughter is the only one who sent her letter out to Satan instead of Santa. Dear Sarah, yours truly, Satan. But I wager I looked even stupider when I turned around to see a 7-foot-tall teddy bear standing behind me and I screamed like a little girl. Oh, okay. Wow. I said, nodding my head vigorously until I realized I was nodding for no reason and stopped. No. I'm Sarah's dad. I replied. Listen, I don't really think that dash. Then I will go to school so that I may love her. Wait a second. School is over now and she'll be home any moment. But you can't dash. Cheetos are also fine. I'll help myself. Now, Sarah honey, don't be scared, I said. Not knowing what else to do, I typed the customer service number on the back of the letter into my phone with shaking hands. It's not my joke, she said. It's just something management forces us to say. Okay. I said. Listen, I think there's been some sort of mistake. Look, all heaven and hell placements are final. The appeals process is really more of a formality. Oh, the woman said, her tone relaxing a bit. You must be the Rogers household. Satan wanted to let you know that he hopes your daughter enjoys the gift, but that sadly he'll be out of the office until next Wednesday, so he'll check back with you then. Well, can I maybe return it until then? So I'm stuck with a giant monster teddy bear until Satan calls me next week? No, of course not, the woman said. Satan won't be calling you, she said. He has you scheduled for a face-to-face appointment. A few croaking sounds escaped my throat as she asked me if there was anything else I needed, and when I couldn't answer I heard her mutter something about how rude humans were before hanging up. I slowly turned around to see Sarah laughing with glee as Frank and Teddy tossed her up in the air and caught her over and over again. I'm not sure how I'm going to keep a 7-foot-tall monster teddy hidden from the rest of the neighborhood until Wednesday, nor do I have the slightest idea what I'm going to do when Satan himself shows up on my doorstep. Right now, I only know one thing for certain, I'm gonna have to buy more Cheetos. 10.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
You know when people say, if something seems too good to be true, it usually is? Turns out they're right. I recently moved in with my boyfriend. He has a beautiful flat in an old building. Penthouse, and everything. We hadn't been together that long, but I knew from the first time I met him that he was the one. We'd be together, till death do us part, if it was up to me at least. When he asked me to move in with him, I was thrilled. I had been living in a crappy flat share with 6 other people, and owned no furniture. Packing up my stuff was easy, and his apartment was a dream. I had only been over there 2 or 3 times before I moved in. For some reason he always seemed to prefer staying at my place. Maybe it made him feel young, who knows. Cal worked a lot, so I would spend the days alone in the flat. I'm a painter. And Cal was very supportive of my art. He told me I could use the spare bedroom as an atelier, and he even convinced me to quit my waitressing job so I could dedicate all my time to my art. I loved him so much. I looked around the room. There were at least 5 flies there. When I told Cal about it later, he got really annoyed. Sometimes. Well, maybe if you weren't such a pig, this wouldn't happen. God, if you're gonna make a mess, at least don't complain to me about it. I'm sorry. I exclaimed, distressed. His whole demeanor changed so fast. It didn't occur to me that it was my fault. Babe, no. I'm sorry. It's just, I've been under a lot of pressure lately. I didn't mean to take it out on you. Just ignore the flies, I'm sure they'll go away eventually. When I returned to the room after getting lunch, the smell had gotten much worse. I hadn't really noticed it as I painted, but after the fresh air from the outside, the stench was impossible to ignore. A rank stench of decay. I closed the door, and opened the window. I decided I had to talk to Cal about it later. I guessed one of the rats had died in the walls, or something. We had been taking the elevator down to get the last of my stuff, and it stopped on the floor below the flat. I noticed Cal looking uncomfortable, probably anticipating the neighbor. The doors opened, and I felt my nostrils flare in objection. The man waiting outside the doors was tall, skinny, dressed all in black, and smelt worse than anyone I have ever encountered. He locked eyes with me, then let his gaze slide over to Cal, and then back to me. I shuddered involuntarily. He frowned, staring at me for several seconds. Then he entered the lift without a word. We rode down in silence. The next day there were more flies, and the smell was even stronger. I called Cal at work. I didn't really want to press the issue, he seemed to be really stressed. I just kept the door closed and the window open, and sprayed the whole room with Febreze like he told me to. I spent the day sketching outside instead, not able to take the smell. After talking myself up, I went to ring his doorbell. As the door cracked open, the smell of stale sweat and cat piss rolled over me. I almost staggered backwards. He opened the door just as much as the security chain would allow. Excuse me sir, I live right upstairs, I just moved in with. I cut myself off as I saw him start to slowly close the door. Sorry, I'll be fast. It's just a bit awkward, but there's kind of a smell in our flat. His eyes went wide, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me. The door stopped moving. His face contorted into a frown. He still didn't say anything. I don't know. I was flailing. Do you know if there are rats in the building? I finished, defeated. He smiled. I shuddered, frantically pressing the elevator button over and over. I heard the door click shut behind me. I sighed in relief. I swore to not ever talk to that guy again. Whatever the hell he was doing to make our beautiful flat smell like death, I didn't want to know it. Back in the apartment, the stench had started to spread into the living room. I realized I was scared that Cal would get mad. I knew he thought I had messed something up in the atelier. The idea that I was scared of his reaction unsettled me. He was the love of my life, after all. I decided I was nervous because I wanted him to be happy, that I didn't want him to be stressed about anything else. I decided I wasn't scared of him. I loved him, after all. As I went over our relationship in my head, it hit me that the smell here was completely different from the downstairs apartment. There, it smelled like stale sweat and old cat piss. Here, it smelled like death. No rats my ass, I mumbled. I knew a fat rat in the wall was the only explanation. Apparently, that's a thing. Lucky for me had a cancellation, so he could come right over. So damn lucky for me. I frowned, thinking Cal would get mad. But he never goes into the atelier. I figured I could just put a canvas in front of the hole and get it fixed. I was sitting in the interrogation room when they told me about the dead body they found behind the wall. I was sitting in the witness box in the courtroom when they told me he had left her there to die a slow, horrifying death. But I was sitting all alone in a cheap motel when I realized that she had still been alive when I moved in.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
My mother always made me play hide and seek with her. It was just her and me, and we played at 9. We played in the park. I thought this was normal. I knew other families didn't do this, but at the same time, I thought there was nothing wrong with us doing it. I liked the park after all. During the night the air was so fresh, and it was silent, and the trees seemed larger than usual. The park was large, but somehow my mother would always manage to walk past me at least 3 times in those 20 minutes. I'd always hear her speaking as she walked past me. "Come out, Clara. Clara, please come out. I'm sick of this stupid game, Clara, it's cold and I just want to go home." I ignored her. When we first started with the games, I'd been foolish enough to leave my hiding spot. My mother's face immediately turned into one of fury. She'd walk up and grab me tightly by the shoulder as she scolded me relentlessly. "I told you not to listen to me. Didn't I?" She would drag me back to the car, and ignore me until the next day, when we played. I didn't know why she did it. After I'd stopped listening to her during the 20 minutes of game time, it would no longer trick me. I knew she was lying, and it simply seemed like a waste of breath and energy to keep calling out for me. I felt a huge urge to win. I needed it, so I started to get creative. I hid myself in the bushes. I'd change my clothing to be more green and black and generally more inconspicuous. I got high up in trees, so it would be difficult to see me from the ground. I learned how to stay still, really, really, still. And when I won, my mother would give me a smile. It wasn't a smile of happiness, or a smile of pleasure. It was more a relieved smile, but I felt so proud when I saw it. We'd go home, and I'd have an easy time falling asleep. Then my father came. One day, when I came back from school, I saw him talking to my mother. He was almost never home. Actually, I'd seen him twice in my entire life, and my mother never really spoke about him. He was really just a stranger to me. I noticed the expression on my mother's face immediately. It was pale, white, shaking, eyes wide. I couldn't hear what he was saying, so I got closer and towards them. Of course, their conversation stopped just as I did it. My father got really energetic right before bedtime. I thought we'd skip the whole hide and seek thing. My mom looked really sick, and looking at the clock, she said, "Let's take a trip to the park." I immediately noticed that she didn't mention hide and seek. Mom told me to change with a certain look, and I caught what she meant immediately. Put on hiding clothes. After doing it, we got into TH car and we drove to the park. My mother was silent the entire way, but my father hummed. I thought about climbing a tree and hiding there, or about diving into a couple of bushes. Trees were only effective if people didn't check. Bushes worked great, but you'd have a small, if no, view of your surroundings. I chose the bushes, jumping into them, and trying to control my breath. After a couple of minutes, I heard my parents walking in the distance. "Clara," Mother said. "Clara, can you hear me, darling?" Then, they came back. "Please, Clara, your dad isn't dangerous, please come out." "Clara, please, I need to get going soon, please come out." "Stop this silly nonsense," Dad said. "Clara, stop with this silly nonsense, come out." "Clara, please come out." Her voice was turning more and more desperate. More guttural. Fortunately, it was what seemed to be around 70 meters away from me. But she was approaching. You won't like it. I certainly wouldn't, but I'm not as stupid and fucking disgusting as you are, Clara. No. I'm glad I'm not a creature of filth like you. The only good you can serve is by being in my belly. By fueling me. The voice was only 20 meters away. You'll regret not coming out. You know, I don't eat the bones. They get stuck in my throat, but I can't leave them. I'll probably take them home with me, and suck on them. They have a good taste, you know. It'll be perfect. I know where you are, she said. Fuck. But then, she began walking away from my spot. I'll suck on your eyeballs before swallowing them. They're better whole, and they're always wet and squishy so they go down the throat easily. If not, there's always blood. Oh, a mouth full of warm blood. Is there a better feeling? I stayed still for that entire night, even after I was certain that they'd gone away. It was only when the sun was above me, and I could hear other children, that I stood up. One child jumped back and shrieked. He must have gotten properly terrified. Then, I made my way back home. Dad wasn't there, but Mom was. She hugged me.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is Horror Slop.
Stay Away from the Ocean, It's Not Safe Anymore, by Richard Saxon. In 1989, we detected a faint call coming from the depths of the ocean. A strange cry from a massive creature, traveling alone in the vast blue waters below. At first, it sounded like an oddity, a malfunctioning hydrophone, but then we heard it again in 1990 and 1991. We called him Blue 52. Every year, we'd hear the lonesome wail. Measured through hydrophones spread across the west coast of America and Canada. Still, it wouldn't be until 2019, before we finally lay eyes upon it. Our crew was tasked with finding him, tag him with a tracker, and observe for others like him. On board the RV Song of Solitude, we traversed the North Pacific in search of a whale that had been heard, but never seen. Do you think he knows? Rita asked as we stared out at the horizon. Knows what? I asked. She sighed. That there are others like him out there. I don't know. Why else would he sing? 40 years alone, just looking for someone else, she trailed off. There it was, surfacing for a breath of fresh air. An 80-feet-long whale, spurting a fountain of water from his blowhole. He had a magnificent blue color, yet the shape of his body resembled that of a fin whale. Our theory of it being a hybrid had been confirmed, and he looked extraordinarily healthy considering that he had survived on his own for so long. He's magnificent. Rita exclaimed in excitement. We spent the next 3 weeks just tracking him, hoping to see another of his kind. Alas, he remained alone. During the nights, I often found Rita staring out at the ocean, marking each time he surfaced to breathe. I don't know. Just a gut feeling, I guess. Poor Eros. Yeah, I figured we're the closest thing he has to a family. We ought to be the ones naming him. Not at all. As the mission went on, Rita started sleeping less and less. She was afraid that we'd lose Eros if we didn't keep a constant eye on him. Whales hardly ever sleep, constantly needing to resurface, always on the move. Of all the mammals, they have the lowest requirement for sleep. There's another. Another whale, she shouted. I knew it, I knew Eros wasn't alone. Suddenly, our depressing job had turned to one of joy. If there were two, we could assume with high probability that there were more. In fact, we might have been witnessing the beginning of a new subspecies of whale. It was a beautiful moment to behold. You sure it's not just a malfunction? One of the crew members asked. Could it be a calf? No, it's not coming up. Are we sure it's a whale? I don't know, but even whales can't hold their breath forever. We discussed the possibility of a new species entirely, but before we could even alert our superiors back on the mainland, we heard something else. It was a third song. Then a fourth, and a fifth, and before long, a whole pod of these creatures had been detected. They were massive, far larger than any known creature to occupy the ocean. It was a frightening, but intriguing discovery. Where the hell are they? Captain Banks asked. They looked like torn pieces of bright green flesh, bobbing up and down like jellyfish through the water. They had massive bodies covered in glowing blisters. Dozens of tendrils reached out from their mangled mass. What we assumed to be their heads, had multiple, dark holes with thin membranes through which they emitted their songs. What are they? I asked. Before my question could be answered, one of the crew members shouted out in protest. All we heard was a splash, as someone dropped into the water. Simon, he just took an anchor and jumped off the ship. What do you think we just saw? I asked the captain. He nodded. Why else would they venture this far up? Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of an anchor moving on deck. We rushed outside to find Rita standing by the edge, staring longingly into the ocean below. Rita, what are you doing? The dancers of the sea. Their songs are so beautiful. Don't you hear them? I took a slow step towards her, ready to snatch her away from the edge. Before I could even get close, she just stepped over, and fell into the water. Rita! I shouted in despair as she sank out of sight. By the time we could even turn around to search for her, she'd be too far gone to rescue. Anyone that willingly jumped into the depths, could never be rescued. Captain Banks took a knife, and tried to cut one of the tendrils that had wrapped around our deck. It was a futile task, and another quickly wrapped around his leg, instantly snapping the bone within. He screamed as the creature tore at him, digging into the leg, and reaching through his abdomen. He was dead before he even hit the water. I looked for any sign of my crewmen, but they'd all been snatched away. Alone, I peeked into the waters, and saw what had been my unlikely hero. I don't know what happened to Eros, if he managed to get away, or if the things caught up with him. Whatever the case, he saved my life, and I owe him everything. In his search for a family, he inadvertently awoke something from the deepest parts of the ocean. According to recent hydrophone recordings, there are millions of them across the Pacific, and they're spreading further and further around the world. The seas are no longer safe, and there's nothing we can do to stop them.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon. And leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same that time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.